Welcome to the Breathworks podcast. Breathe better, perform better. I'm Mahesh Kumar, your host and guide in this journey to supercharge your athleticism, skyrocket your productivity, and boost your overall well-being. Let's get started. So, welcome to yet another episode of the Breathworks podcast, where we breathe better and perform better. And today I have the honor, I should say, of introducing a Swedish comrade who's been here in Stockholm, a retired NFL legend, Johnny Uduya. So let me give a quick brief introduction of Johnny. Johnny was born October 1, 1981 in Stockholm, Sweden. He's had a wonderful, wonderful career in the National Hockey League or NHL, playing for several teams, including the Jersey Devils, the Thrashers in Atlanta, Winnipeg Jets, and the list goes on. So David or Johnny rather, is a two-time Stanley Cup champion, having won with the Chicago Blackhawks in 2013 and 2015. So he's had a lot of battle scars, a lot of championship trophies in his cabinet. Comes back to Sweden after retiring and goes into, I'm sure, some introspection and says, you know what, I need to pioneer this breathing techniques that could help athletes push them even further. So he starts HALE, which is, by the way, a lovely name. So it's a wordplay on inhale and exhale, obviously. So it's HALE Breathing Center here in Stockholm. They obviously have a digital presence online with the breathing app, and they have a physical studio here in Stockholm. So Johnny, I'm so excited you're here. It's taken some back and forths, and there's a summer in between. So here we are. Tell us how are you?
Well, thank you for having me. I'm doing very good at the moment, although very busy after the summer. Everything is kind of back into full steam, which is exciting, but also in need of being mindful with my breathing. Yeah, so
I'm sure you're in the right studio there and
yeah.
surrounded by right people. You have how many trainers do you have today at Hale?
Well, we have trained over 200 guides so far. The last couple of years, we have two different programs. Obviously, one it's I would say more overall and also connected to the class structure that we also have. That this is quite unique, and the way that we deliver classes. And then the other one, so that's the breath guide certification, and then we have athletic breath also certification on that side, which is more towards trainers and PTs and individuals more in the training athletic field. So
Wow.
yeah.
I'm so excited. 200 people have gone through it, and we're just getting started. So really exciting to follow your career, your new career. But let's sort of go back a little bit, if you may. You're obviously an NFL, like a hockey legend. So why don't we get started there and tell us a little bit about your professional career and some reflections from there, and then let's sort of come into breathing.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was always I love the game in the way that maybe not just playing it, but also in the way that you kind of have to put the effort in and love, working out and all of these other aspects of becoming better that sometimes could be very challenging. So I think I was fortunate in that. I've never been the superstar at any mean, but I think I have an ability of being consistent over a longer period span of time, and also being very curious, and something that I've noticed later and later now also is showing up in different spaces. And obviously HALE is one of those things that I'm a curious individual, and number one on my priority list is learning new things and developing. So moving from kind of the athletic part, obviously it's a completely different world and kind of enclosed in, and stop that. I think I stopped almost 6 years ago now, and then moving into a completely different space where, well, basically there's no limit what you can do in the world. That's a fascinating concept, I think, for me. So I felt I was very fortunate. I have the opportunity now to work with something I love again, which is I feel extremely fortunate with that. So a good transition.
So, ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to Swedish humility at its best here. You have a legend that's talking about curiosity when asked about his career. So, but I have to take you back. I have to take you back to little Johnny, 7 years old, first time on the ice. Walk us through. Like, was it, you speak about like it was obvious for you to, to push yourself and enjoy the training. Not many kids, and not even look. If I look at myself, and I played cricket semi-professionally in India, it was not the most enjoyable part of it. Performing was enjoyable, but take us, back to 7-year-old Johnny starting to play, your favorite game, and how that's evolved and taken you where you are today.
Uh, well, I think when you start playing, you just want to. I mean, I got into the game because my older brother played, and I had no idea really what I was doing. I just thought that that's what you're supposed to do, and that's what I did. And then I wouldn't really say it was a choice in some way for me. I think I have that part of me, like I said, that becomes curious and then want to drive performance and become better. I don't know if it would have mattered what I was doing. I think I probably would apply that in everything that I do.
Wow.
Obviously, for some reason, hockey was kind of a good mix for me in between, physical part and the mental part and whatever it might be. It seemed that it was suiting me pretty good, obviously. And
Mm,
in that, I was lucky. If I would have played basketball, maybe he would have been completely different. So uh, yeah, I mean, there's so many circumstances that bring something together, and
mm.
it's easy, in hindsight, and say this and this and this. But I think in general, you start doing something that you love doing, and then after a while, it turns into who you are.
Yeah,
So yeah.
yeah, very much. Amen, amen. Is that how you got introduced to the world of breathing through hockey? Did you have sort of an
Uh,
introduction there?
I wish I was going to say that's one of the things that I'm trying to do now.
Mm,
Hockey is probably the most segregated and traditional team sport in the world, in the Western
mm,
world for sure.
mm,
Um, there's some benefits to that, but there's also
mm.
some challenges. One of the challenges is that new ideas don't easily make themselves. Uh,
They don't
it
come
take
through the system, yeah.
no, it takes a long time before they kind
Mm,
of get solidified. And I mean, we started to when I was in Chicago, for example, we started to, and this is over 10 years ago, we started to focus a lot about, recovery and measuring recovery and sleep and nutrition and all of these things that are normal now, even in the normal population. Uh, we were doing over 10 years ago, and people thought I was insane.
mm.
And now I see a lot of people, measuring their sleep, for example. So things things change sometimes faster in the normal world than they do in the sport world, or
That's
especially in
interesting.
team sports.
Mm,
So no, I not ran into it inside of hockey, and it's something that I'm obviously trying to push now. I ran
mm.
into it uh, just being curious and finding different modalities that I thought was useful at that time. I didn't really understand that much about it in the beginning. I thought it was kind of this weird thing, and it was not really that much connected to any type of, performance and enhancing something. So I just thought it was interesting that you have this kind of amazing tool that everybody carries with them, and it has this enormous impact on, your nervous system, on your mind,
Mm.
your emotions, and nobody knows how to use it.
No, if
Everybody
he
take it. Everybody takes it for
for
granted,
granted,
and
yeah.
yeah, and if I can't find it and had a tough time understanding it, like how is anybody else going to do that? That's not
Mm,
might not be, interested in it that
mm,
way. So that's
mm,
really, I think the embryo of trying to kind of decode this and make it as simple as possible. So
mm.
yeah.
Do you have a wish that, knowing all that you know today with your breathing, you went back to a 27-year-old Johnny at its peak and applied? What would the results be? Would you be winning more Stanley Cups?
It's always difficult to say. I think that comes with everything. It's like if I would have eaten better, would I have scored more goals? Or,
Mm.
I think it's very difficult to apply that. I think a lot of things that we do, especially when we're younger, you look at training, for example, we you get away with a lot of things, and sometimes things could be more optimal. Um, Sometimes, yeah, of course, you could have pushed harder or did something, but I think the biggest difference that I think my experience of my career, I think would have been different, and
Mm.
I would have been more present. I would have had most
Mm.
likely, better ways of recovering. I most likely would have been able to handle my emotions better.
Mm.
I think I would have understood myself in a different way that I think would have been beneficial. So
Mm.
I can't say what that would have led to. It's really difficult to know, but I have a hard time seeing that it would not have made any difference at all.
Mm.
So
Have you had a chance to
yeah,
work with any athletes as a breath coach or any sort of with what you're
yeah,
doing today? And
yeah.
and do you see how do you measure the performance before, after, or what kind of transitions do you typically see?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few athletes. I mean, I started out when I stopped was kind of like I was experimenting with 5, 6 years ago. Now I was experimenting with a lot of hockey players and try to understand like how to implement this and what is the benefit, and like not so much going into measuring everything. I
Mm.
think I did that mostly on myself.
Mm.
And then a lot of obviously early on subjective experiences and going from studies that I've seen resulting in different outcomes. I think really now is 6 years in, 5 years with playing around with basically everything in the breath field that has anything to do with performance. I think now I started to understand, okay, what is it that we're going to measure? How are we going to measure it? And then kind of approaching that, creating this, I wouldn't say the ultimate program, but something that is very simple for somebody to follow in a shorter amount of time, and also that could show the kind of the relative progress that they would have with that. So that's what I'm working on at the moment, actually.
What would be an example? Like what would, if you know to make a concrete
Uh,
example?
well, there's the challenge that I think everybody runs into in this field, and I haven't seen anybody really solving this yet. Is you have all these, like the last 10 years, there's a lot of data coming out with touch point on breathe this way and you will get these results, or work with now become very technical, but it's a breathing pod. So I think the people who are listening to this might appreciate that. But you're working with breath holds, for example, or you're working with nose breathing, or you're working with diaphragmatic function or breathing mechanics. And individually, uh, you can see some results in certain studies, right? But of what I've seen so far, there's not a single program that you can do this for 1 month or 6 weeks, and these are the results that you will get combined from doing this.
Mm.
And that is what I'm trying to explore now,
Mm.
because otherwise it becomes people need to see in reference with somebody else. So like you, for example, you need to see in reference somebody like you doing a
Mm.
program and
Mm.
getting the benefits and
Mm.
results of it, and
Mm.
not just Usain Bolt,
Mm.
because that
Too
we
far
can,
out.
yeah,
Mm.
it's too far out. It's not
Mm.
really relatable, and it
Mm.
could be hard for you to implement, right? So
Mm.
working with athletes, it's very specific. You need to
Mm.
find like the specific tools and uh, whatever habits they have around the breathing, whatever technical things that you might have to work on, you need to work on. But for the general population, you need to find somewhat of understanding in a simple enough program that you can implement on a lot of people.
Mm.
And so far, I haven't seen that anywhere.
No.
There's a lot of methods and ideas around it, but nothing really that comprehensive. So that's
Mm.
the challenge I'm trying to dig
Mm.
into.
That's exciting. I mean, because obviously there's athletes, there's obviously the peak athletes like yourself, and then there's like lifestyle athletes that are pretty well in the top, 5, 10 percentile, and then you have a large population of people that are fit but maybe can utilize breathing techniques. So there's so much diffusion that can happen with the right program or right programs, so to speak. But can I ask you, why is breathing, being so overlooked for performance? Like, you mentioned the example of sleep, you mentioned the example of nutrition, which seems to be very commonplace right now. Um, so why is breathing so overlooked? What's the reason? Is it because people are not as curious, have not been curious, or?
It's very abstract.
Hmm.
That's the one thing. It's very hard to measure. Um, well, I think it's just we don't really have we're starting to get there now with proper measurements or machinery for measurements. There's a few tools you can use, but they're quite expensive. I mean, it's like having a discussion around sleep before we had like the auras and the Whoop bands and everything.
Hmm.
And people have been on me for going to sleep at a good time, and they're like, there's no difference, I feel I sleep good, or I drink 2 glasses of wine at night and I have no problem sleeping, or I drink coffee all day, I have no problem sleeping. And they believe that is true
Hmm.
because that's what they want to believe, obviously.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
now they can actually measure it. And
Hmm.
now all of a sudden it's like, oh shit, this is not what I thought it was, right? And all of a
Hmm.
sudden it becomes interesting to be able to sleep better. And when they
Hmm.
do that,
Hmm.
now they're starting to feel better and the results are coming
Of
into place.
course, of
And
course.
sleep is this like enormous
Hmm.
monster that if you don't get that right, it doesn't matter what you do.
No.
So what can then it becomes interesting. Okay, what are the potential tools you can use then
Hmm.
for actually having better sleep? And it seems like breathing is one of them, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So it could be food timing. When you eat, for example, is enormous for sleep as well, right? Or
Hmm. Of
exercise.
course,
When
of course.
when are you exercising for your sleep? Are you doing that? Do you go after a job at 11 o'clock at night to do high intervals at the gym and then go home and think you're going to go to sleep, right? So
No.
so I think that the proper measurements of it and
Hmm.
simplified tools of how to measure breathing.
Hmm.
I think some of them are coming out now on the market. There's like these variables you can kind of have, and you can watch certain patterns, and you can understand better your sleep or your breathing. They will help, but there's also another part of it that's. I mean, sleep is a fascinating. Uh, you know, uh, I think it's very similar in a lot of places because it's tangible
Hmm.
and you understand if you're doing it or not. It also had this very abstract function where you
Hmm.
know that you're dreaming in sleep and you're appearing in states and things that you don't know if they're beneficial or not,
Hmm.
but you know that they're doing something, right?
Hmm.
And breathing could be very, very the same way. There's a
Hmm.
technical way to breathing,
Hmm.
but then you also have all these abstract states.
Hmm.
And still today, now there's some research coming out, with psilocybin and
Hmm.
breath work and all this, like that they're matching and seeing that there's doing something, right? But um, it's still kind of in its infancy, I would say, that
Hmm.
it becomes this very abstract thing that, oh, what happens when I go into that state? Is that beneficial? It's scary, whatever it
But
might be.
don't you think, Johnny, don't you think there's an instant feedback loop? Because if you do some types of breathing practices, you immediately feel certain effects, like I do the hypopressives practice, which is a low pressure breathing technique, and you do breath holds. It's primarily for your core and like for your back and for your
Yeah.
pelvic floor. And immediately, like 7 minutes, 6 minutes, 4 minutes in, I feel like, like there's so much more blood flow. I feel more active. I feel more awake. I feel more obviously, connected. Don't you think, it's abstract, which I understand, but there's also an instant feedback mechanism which happens with breathing. It's like you really start feeling it if you do it the right way or the right technique or.
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely, and I think that's beneficial, uh, and part of it is positive, but part of it is also a challenge
Mm,
because in meditation, for example, the changes are subtle. So
mm,
you need to practice it for a long time to start to feel things,
mm,
but also to see kind of a general overall improvement.
mm,
Uh, Even though it's happening, you might not understand that it's happening.
mm, mm.
So it's nobody thinks that doing one meditation one time is going to do anything for you.
No,
I've never heard anybody say that.
no.
Breathwork has another problem.
Mm,
Some techniques in breathwork, and that's, for us exactly, have a studio.
mm,
people sometimes see breath work as an experience because it is. And it's beautiful because it will bring you a different state of mind instantly. And you can experience things that you thought was never possible for you to do and you never done before in your life. That's an experience. So it opens up your mind to new possibilities. That's good. The challenge is, if you see it like that, then the application of the continuous work that you need to do over time to become better lessens. So the motivation for you will go the other way. You will see it as, you know, we have companies coming, we're going to have a kickoff, or you have people coming, bringing their family. This is our family night, you know, and then they treat it as only that. And the challenge with that is that it's better than nothing. You know, it's like going to the movies. It's a good night, right? But if you want to change something, or if you want to enhance something, then continuously there needs to be something going on over time.
Of course. And we need to find a way to diffuse it into the mainstream so more people do it, more people see other people do it. So it's not just Usain Bolt and Novak Djokovic, but it's my neighbor next door that's starting to, you know, do other things. So there is obviously that diffusion cycle that can go faster, you know, with more people talking and work that you're doing and other colleagues are doing. So it's exciting. But I want to come back to a couple of things you said, which is one of them is the growth of devices. And the other thing is the measurement, right? So when it comes to breathing, what are we actually measuring to in terms of enhancing performance? Is it the classic like VO2 and you know your breathing efficiency, or have you found ways to look at more things? And what are the tools that you, even though they're expensive today, what's your pedigree of tools that you use in your work that is interesting?
Well, some of the things that you obviously measure, VO2 would be one of them. I think that's a foundational base. It has some insight, I think, also for longevity and overall health, and it's an important measurement. You know, lung function in some ways. So you can have a spirometer, for example, if you want to do tests like that. I have a lot of people coming to me with asthma, or you want to see potential improvement and what you can do with that. Another thing, and the biggest one that I do, I use a capno trainer, a capnography measurement tool, and you measure exhaled carbon dioxide, and how we use it. It's really it's correlated with habitual way of breathing. So the way that the body is incorporating breathing or using breathing or breathing is fundamentally it's behavior based, and it's a psychophysiology connection, and that means that the body and the mind is one thing, or the nervous system and the body and the mind is one thing, and the response, or the natural response of breathing is something that happened, right? It's this unconscious function, right? And at times, or most of the times, that is happening unconsciously, and the body has the ability to learn or take on different patterns in the same way as you would do, you know, lifting or subconsciously, consciously learning a new language. It could be whatever way you want to implement something. We take on these patterns, right? And all patterns or all habits also have triggers connected to them. So, for example, I measured somebody, an athlete, the other day, and as soon as we put pressure on the breathing, a certain breathing pattern appears.
And what do you mean by pressure on the breathing?
So either it could be physical, we put them into physical intensity, or we put the intensity in the breathing. And after that, there's a certain reaction. And there could be something, you know, a recovery mechanism or some type of habit that they have when we stress their breathing. So how do we make this simple? You go out running, and as soon as your breath rates start to go to a certain number, it could be that at a certain point, whatever in your life, you have something associated, a negative experience associated with higher breathing rate. Maybe you had a panic attack when you were younger, who knows? So you have association with that. And now we push your breathing rate up higher than normal. So maybe from, you know, whatever 16 breaths per minute you have in normal, and maybe we put you up to 35, 40, or even 50 breaths. At 50 breaths, something triggers. And at that point, you start to get panic. And you're not panicking because you're tired. You're panicking now because you have a signal in your brain from something that happened before that is now emphasizing or driving the breath even further. And that could be, a certain breath pattern. Now you start to breathe only in your chest, or you incorporate it in your neck when you're breathing, or whatever it might be, right? And that could be an extreme challenge for an athlete. You might have heard or might have seen, people going out for a run, and all of a sudden they're like, 10 minutes in, I'm gassed, I can't do anything. And then my question will be, okay, how something most likely is happening here, and let's investigate if something is happening or not. And that's it. That's what we're using the Capno trainer for. So we're trying to acknowledge, like, we don't diagnose people, but we try to acknowledge what is actually happening, and can they find what is happening, and could we sort that out, and can we replace that pattern with another pattern that's more beneficial. So fundamentally, if we're collecting everything together, fundamentally what we try to do is uphold the carbon dioxide level, so the blood level of carbon dioxide, because that's beneficial for taking up the oxygen,
yeah.
And not having people going into a panic mode where they need to control their breath in any way, and then get themselves out of a good state of proper breathing. So that's like fundamentally what we're trying to
That's
achieve.
interesting. That's interesting. So what are the fundamental principles, just carrying on there, that you think everyone / every athlete should be or could be incorporating? Obviously you spoke about like having, a certain breaths per minute, for instance. If you can sort of speak a little bit about the common principles that you see for using breathing to enhance your performance.
Yeah, I mean, we all have individual variations for breath rate. So, I mean, there's a span. It could be, I don't know, 6 to 20 breaths. Younger people usually have a little bit higher. Also, they have a higher pulse, and they have a higher, usually higher breath rate as well. But whatever span that is, I think starting to use nose breathing for somebody, and have them being comfortable, with nose breathing is a really good start. I think that should be a fundament for every athlete out there. It does not mean that nose breathing is the only thing you should do all the time. That's two completely different things. It's like it's like training max heart rate, right? Or high intensity sprints. You should be able to do that if you're, depending on the sport you're in, obviously. But if you're in a team sport, for example, you should be able to sprint maximum for a certain amount of time, depending on your sport, right? That doesn't mean you're going to do that all the time. That'd be impossible, right? So same thing here. You want to train the capacity for doing that. So that's one thing I would say.
Is there like a rule of thumb with nasal breaths contra open mouth breaths? Like, is there any rule of thumb that you see? Like 90, if you're breathing X per minute, use 90% nasal, 10%, or it's impossible
I
to
would
say
say, I mean, there's a lot of talk about zone training, I think, when it comes to this. If you have zone training, anything up to a kind of a lactic acid threshold, whatever that is, zone 1, zone 2, you should absolutely use nose breathing. Maybe zone 3, halfway up zone 4, if depending on your fitness level, obviously, but you should be able to stay under kind of the lactic acid threshold, and you should be able to nasal breathe at that, up to that point. Comfortably doing that. If you can train yourself to surpass that, of course, that could be useful. It depends on how accustomed you are to it. It probably also will relate to kind of your breathing mechanics. So yes, because you nose breathe and you have max pulse, and now your breathing is all choppy and you can't get it down, and you're not activating your rib cage properly, then your nose is not going to help you. And then, of course, that we say that we talked about earlier, the challenge with finding a habitual pattern that might kick in at the early point. And that is something also I would really emphasize for athletes to try to feel. So what if you don't have a measurement tool, try to feel without influencing your breathing. Like when you go through these different levels, right, of exertion, then try to feel what your breathing is actually doing. And can you notice also if there's some type of emotion connected to that? Because most likely some type of panic will show up somewhere, and the panic precedes the breathing most of the time.
That's interesting.
But it could be the opposite also, that the breathing will trigger the panic, of course. But notice how they combine with each other. I think that's a really good, like, being mindful of that. I think is really good, because it's so individual to see and notice where it kicks in. But that's something I would look for. Yeah.
Interesting. So nasal breathing is one, understanding your own trigger patterns is another. And you mentioned, there's no program today that is doing this, that is, making it more accessible. But if you go back to sort of the methods behind, an eventual program, what are some of the exciting, impactful methods that you use for your training / your customers that you see producing interesting results as long as there's some consistency?
Well, mostly what we do, obviously, is breathing mechanics is an important part, and especially for anybody that working with VO2, kind of longer bouts of training. If you're running, or if you're cycling or swimming or something, then I think most of them already have realized that they need to understand somewhat how to work with the breath and find that flow in the breathing, right? So finding kind of the perfect pace, the perfect or stride length, or whatever it might be. I think most of them at the higher level have some type of idea of what that is. So that might be one thing. And like, probably how can you spend less energy breathing? And how do you do that? I think that's one thing. Another thing that we're obviously measuring now is this capability, and especially for team sports, is the ability to repeat sprints, and the ability to continuously, hammering, certain amount of sprinting, have a rest period, certain amount of sprinting, have a rest period, and continuously be able to do that for a longer amount of time. And there we work with a lot of breath hold practices, and finding different ways of how to do that, and finding also the sport specific need for that, if you have athletes, for example. So those are some of the things that we will put in the program and have like included in the program as well. So
That's
and then of
interesting.
course you have recovery and relaxation, which is enormous. We measure HRV, for example. We're going to measure sleep, because those are, like I said, if you can't get that right, then we'll have a tough time to perform. So
there's a higher probability of dysfunction if you're not sleeping well, right? Or breath dysfunction.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I mean, breathing dysfunction shows up with sleep as well.
Of course. Are you a proponent of tape on the mouth when sleeping?
I do. Yeah, I do.
Well, there was a big sigh there, though.
Yeah. No,
you don't like it?
No, I do. I'm just cautious of the recommendation. I think it seemed to work very good for a lot of people, but some of the science are not really there yet either. So I usually recommend people to try it. If they like it and they think it works, then good for you. And if not, don't lose sleep over it. So.
Do you think there's enough science going into this field, given there's very limited money to be made about breathing? Or maybe there's an industry coming which I don't see fully, like there's billions to be made. But is there enough science going into it, you believe, or is there a gap?
I think there's more and more now. I've seen this just an explosion the last, I think, 5 years of the amount of papers that are coming out. I can't even keep up anymore. Before it was like 2 a year that came out, and now it feels like it's every week there's something new coming out. So I think that's exciting. I think that's good. It's going to clear out kind of this misunderstandings and confusions. And I think also we're going to see, like I said, seeing more and more studies in the way that we're trying to put together now, that also measuring specific kind of programs, individual needs for some athletes and stuff. Because if you think of it, if you look at like the training community, and let's say you want you want to build muscle, right? That methodology has been around for 50 years now. And you ask somebody, okay, how should I breathe? And it's been around for 5 years. It's an enormous difference. So there's going to be a lot of progress here, I think,
for sure,
in a very short time. And now also we have AI for programming, and it's going to be very interesting. I think the next 5 years or so, we'll see where this can go, because very few athletes that I know that started to pay attention to this are like, no, that shit doesn't work. Like, I haven't heard anybody say that.
No.
So there's something there. It just needs to be, breath work is early, and breathing into breath work is early, and breath work and breathing practices in athleticism is even earlier.
Yeah.
So even though there's some individuals that are kind of figured out, I would say, in some ways, I think there's for the majority and the early majority to kind of implement that, we still have some ways to go. And that's true for breathwork in general.
Sure.
We like it, but
yeah.
If I ask 90% of the people that I see, they're like, "You're working with what? Breathing?"
Yeah. What does that even mean? Yeah. Is it yoga? Because a lot of the times the misconception is it's yoga and meditation, which is, in a sense, is a good thing because it's a subcategory.
Yeah.
But there's obviously so much more. So I want to start coming towards the end of our lovely session here. So I want to ask you some personal questions about how do you use what you preach. Obviously, your prime sport career has passed, but that doesn't mean you don't use your. So how do you use breathing today, and what are your favorite breathing techniques or breathwork hacks that you use to keep going?
Well, I think I'm kind of a generalist in some ways. So I like, obviously I try to attend classes that we have both online and in the studio.
What kind of classes are they, just so people understand?
Well, we have the unique structure that we have is that we created signature classes around really the fundamental needs that we kind of saw. So obviously we have kind of a basic introduction classes, which is geared towards, I would say, more getting understanding of what breathwork can do for you. So it's in some ways an experience. We have a class that's called Heal, which is more of a recovery class. So if you really want to regulate your nervous system, you feel like there's a lot of things, then you kind of want to go into that. You can also, we have another one that's called Power, which is way more, it's like a workout for the breathing muscles and very high intensity. We have Elixir, which is kind of this gateway class of more abstract spaces. We have deeper classes that are longer, and the Bliss and the Connect. So we really try to sort it out in kind of a class structure where you can pick what you want and you
can people just jump in and out, or is it like a progression?
We'd like for you to start in the introduction phase and kind of start from there, and start with maybe the little bit less intense classes, but it's not like it's dangerous to jump in on the deep end. But we have good guides that would facilitate that. But as anything, I think it's better to start in kind of the slow, curious end, and then you can always build. There's always more to find. In breathwork, there's no end, so
it's
you
an
never
ocean
have to
of
worry.
things.
You never have to worry that you're not going to find stuff. It's more of like starting simple in that way. So I usually do one class that's named Resilience, which is kind of it's a breath holding class, I would say, without any type of hyperventilation. So you kind of build up some of the adaptation for air hunger, and relaxation. So I'd like to do that one. I obviously go sometimes to.
Is that like a 15-minute routine, or is it like a 1 hour? Like you build up.
Classes we usually have. Shortest ones are 45 minutes.
Wow. Okay.
So it is kind of immersive experience for those signature classes. So very same you see at the yoga structure, where you have kind of different styles that you can do, right? And then I would do some type of hyperventilation breath hold work, depending on what is available at the time. But we have some classes like that as well, so I would do some of that. I really think that's nice to I wouldn't say dissociate, but also come into this kind of abstract space, the meditative space from that angle. Also relieving some of my stress. I think that's a really good function for that. Otherwise, I use obviously implement breathing in workouts that I do, whatever it's stabilizing the body or working with these different breath holds for adaptation. And yeah, I try to not do anything every day, but most of the days I do something with breathing, and it doesn't have to be. I mean, for us also in the app, we have sessions that are like 3 minutes. So
I know exactly. That was what I was coming to
yeah,
because
yeah,
I do like 7 minutes a day in the morning, and
yeah,
then I do it as part of my warm up when
yeah,
I is that would you if somebody who's just listening and wants to get started wants to use this for their running or swimming, would
yeah.
you rather get them to do a couple of these techniques that you spoke about, whether that's the breath holding or the nasal breathing as part of a warm up, or would you want them to get into the experience, learn it, and then see how they can sort of micro do it?
Uh, well, in the perfect way, I would say both. I mean, it's good to get an understanding for what breath work and breathing can be, but also the implementation is so wide. That's why I think it's so much fun and cool. I mean, you can start with just trying to do a few breath holds as you're warming up and do another exercise, and that's perfectly fine too, right? So,
Can I just, sorry, Johnny, so when you say breath hold, so people understand, because there are
yeah,
different types of breath hold, right? There's
that is correct also.
yeah,
Yeah.
so what's your, when you say an easy breath hold that you could guide, what is
Yeah,
that?
yeah. Well, perfect example, you're out jogging, right? And you're out jogging, and one of the things I feel is really beneficial when you're working with breath holding exercises. So holding your breath, right? Then can be done on the inhale or the exhale. One thing that really happens with that is that you kind of you get some adaptation anyways, or supposedly you get some adaptation to the habitual need to breathe, right? And what I've noticed with the people that I work with is when you do that, they get comfortable and not go into overbreathing too early. So it's like you can detect these triggers, one thing, but you can also work with that kind of that feeling and being comfortable with that, right? So you don't have to overbreathe. And if you overbreathe a lot, you lose a lot of carbon dioxide, and then you're into this kind of bad spiral, right? So if you're out jogging, you're jogging, 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 you can work with just a few light breath holds. You just breathe in, you breathe out, and then you keep jogging, and then you feel like the pressure, you're going to feel the pressure of the carbon dioxide rising, rising,
Mm,
rising,
mm,
and you're going to start feel a little bit of panic, and you're trying to be just smoothly with that feeling, and then you exhale out, you can
mm,
stop,
mm,
or you can continue jogging, and you just do
mm.
that a few,
Do
three,
you do
four,
you
five
recommend an
times.
exhale after a breath hold or an inhale because you're lacking oxygen? What
Yeah,
do you?
on this one, I mean, you will have a stronger effect, obviously, doing on the exhale. So
Mm,
it kind of depends a little bit on the exercise, but um, yeah, there might be some other benefits to that as well. But just try to do it on the exhale a few times,
got
and
it.
you don't have to go hard. Just do
Mm,
it, nice and smooth, and see what
mm.
happens. But
So
yeah,
breath hold. So next time you're running, next time you're doing your favorite workout routine, try incorporating a breath hold. What's a good time to aim at in terms of breath hold? Is it few seconds to begin with?
start with whatever is possible, I would say.
Mm. There's no, but there are two schools of thought, right? One is that you need to measure everything, and the other school is just see how your body feels and go with it. Where are you on that spectrum?
Uh, Same thing. I think you should be able to do both.
Mm.
I think numbers are useless if you don't feel what they're like in your body.
Mm, that's
And I
correct.
think feeling, you can be confused because you
Mm.
want to believe certain things.
Mm.
So I think there's a healthy combination of those two to
Mm.
try to understand. So use the uh, performance metrics to understand your wellness grade, and then using that feeling in combination, I think is the best way to do it. So
Beautiful. So I want to finish off by saying, Johnny, where can people find you and end with sort of what's your big vision? What do you hope and expect and wish the world of breathing in 5 years? So tell us, where can people find you
oh.
and tell us what's your vision?
Well, they can find Hale obviously at Hale.center. And
So it's HALE.center, CENTER. Is that right?
Yes. And then
Perfect.
obviously we have Hale Center on Instagram. You can find that as well. We have our new app that's on App Store as well if you want to go in. And that's, of course, you know, near Stockholm, you can book and go here in the studio. Otherwise, we have a lot of online sessions.
Beautiful.
Few sessions, I think, every day that are live guided right away. So I think that's a nice add-on experience.
So
So
Hale Center in the App Store as well, yeah?
yes.
Perfect.
Yes. And
Exciting.
then what I would like for the future. No, but I would love for this to be obviously commonplace. I mean, to make that transition, I also would like it would be lovely if kids can kind of grow up in a world where this is common knowledge. I think that would, with the amount of stress and the amount of intensity that now is rising in society, the technological advancement and everything, which I'm pro. I think the need for connection is still going to be there. I heard Jeff Bezos talk about this, you know, a few months back, or I heard a few months back, and he's like, "Well, how do you predict the future here with the new AI?" He's like, "Yeah, but don't try to predict what's going to be there. Trying to see what's going to be exactly the same." And humans, you and me, will need to have connection with each other on a kind of human basis. And I think breathwork is a beautiful way to facilitate that for a lot of people, and finding that mutual kind of path. And I think that's going to be the same. So I hope that's going to be there in the future. I hope that obviously we can facilitate that. We can teach and educate people in some ways finding a proper way of dealing with not the society outside, but actually with themselves.
How exciting. So Breathworks for the win. You can find Johnny at Hale. If you come to Stockholm, drop by Hale Center. It's right in the middle of the city. If you're online, you can find Hale Center on your app store or on the web. And Johnny, what a pleasure. I'm going to put this out online in the next few weeks, and we'd love to see what people say. And if people want you back, I hope you want to come back on this podcast
Absolutely.
again. And otherwise, I wish you all the best for all the amazing work you do, and keep the breathwork flag flying high. Take care, Johnny.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of the Breathworks podcast. Breathe better, perform better. We hope you're feeling pumped up and ready to take on any challenge today. If you did enjoy this episode, leave a review or share this with a friend who you think might find this body of work useful. Breathing is so simple yet profound. So thank you once again for joining me today. And until next time, keep breathing.